So recently, a question I've been thinking a lot about is, should you go and study your MBA, CIMA, or any other post-qualification after your ACCA? Now, this is something I've been reflecting upon for the last 6 months. So this video isn't going to be a pros and cons list, as in what salary can you expect, or what direction can you go in with your, let's say, career. It's going to be more of like an introspection type of video, where some of the questions that I'm going to be asking myself today, I want you to also go and ask yourself these questions, because it's a big time commitment, firstly. And secondly is, you've been studying so long, you're already a master in what you're already doing. So what is the point in actually going to study further? How this video is going to be structured is I'm going to be going through the two main arguments I've been asking myself or debating with myself for the last 6 months. And then I'll be wrapping it up and essentially giving you a conclusion on what I am most likely going to do, depending on obviously more thought and so. So feel free to skip to any part of the video that's actually going to help you. So essentially the first argument, which I'll share in a bit, I got from a holiday where I was spending time with a girl. And she essentially asked me something that stumped me, and that is, why do you study business? Shouldn't you just do business? And that is a question. I just want you to reflect upon that. Why do you study business? Don't you just do business? I've been thinking a lot about this question for the past 6 months. What I got was, firstly, you study business because it accelerates your rate of learning. And this is a concept that I got from Alex Hormozy. He calls it ignorance debt. Now, essentially, a simple breakdown of what ignorance debt is: the cost of not knowing something that would have been valuable to know earlier. Let's say you're new to business, right? And you open up a shoe store. You spend your entire time, all your money, all your resources into getting the perfect product, and then obviously setting up your storefront and getting your shop ready so that it looks so great. Why would anyone not buy from me? A few months go by and essentially you see, okay, listen, this isn't as easy as I thought, like business usually is. And you go to a webinar a year later. In this webinar, they tell you, listen, you need to start marketing your business and you need to get some way to make sales. You then obviously go and learn as much as you can about sales, read as many books as you can about sales, marketing, and then you start implementing it. Now, ignorance debt is essentially the money that you lose with not knowing that skill beforehand. So let's say you could have made $1 million in that time if you knew how to do that. Now, essentially, if you go and study further and do your MBA, you will be filling certain knowledge gaps within your mind. Let's say it could be with regards to how to manage a team or how to set up a project. There's so many different things that you could be learning. And that got me thinking, right? Especially at the higher level of studying MBAs and studying chartered accountancy, you start to gain a perspective as if to say, I am so well versed with this specific subject that you start explaining that subject to stakeholders at a basic level. So you start explaining the financial statements and you start explaining how the financial statements were put together. You get a super deep understanding of the business, and that could be a big advantage within certain scenarios. But then you have to ask yourself the question, how deep is deep enough? When does it get to a level where you don't experience marginal returns, where knowing a specific term doesn't actually benefit you? Let's face it, if you're in the real world, sometimes theory isn't as valuable as you would want it to be. So many people can go and watch a YouTube video, and then the guy will literally outline, Alex Hormozy will outline specifically the 3 things you need to go and do. But that is such a big difference between actually going and executing on it. So the second question I'm going to ask myself before I go and study an MBA is, am I learning new skills? So if we break down what a skill actually is, it is breaking down knowledge and using it to create something others find valuable. Now, there are obviously a variety of ways of doing this. If I go and study my MBA, will I maybe learn some new frameworks or way of thinking about certain scenarios or about management situations? Would I be able to actually find valuable information that will actually help in a business context? And that got me thinking, having actually expert knowledge that you wouldn't find in any book, very specific knowledge, having that knowledge is extremely valuable. That's what the whole line of business is with consulting. You being an expert giving your expert opinion, giving frameworks to help the client to be able to solve a certain situation. That in itself is a super valuable skill. So essentially, when you're learning these skills, Alex Hormozy actually coins a term which he calls compounding certain skills. So essentially, if I break it down to myself, I am an ACCA member, which means I'm a chartered accountant. I'm good at financial management, financial accounting, financial reporting, all of the above. If I go and study something like an MBA and specialize in operations, or specialize in marketing, maybe let's say sales or whatever the case may be, that is essentially skill stacking. And the more you can do that, the more of a rare person you will become. Because essentially, imagine you get someone who's a chartered accountant who specializes in operations or sales. That is like something that's unheard of. So you become, instead of becoming a 1 of 100 as just a chartered accountant, you now become a 1 of 1, which some businesses within certain niches will find extremely valuable. But I think that requires a lot of foresight on your part as well. I mean, you need to know exactly where you are going in life. You need to also ask yourself the question, where am I now and where do I see myself being in the next 10 to 15 years? Because if you're going to specialize within a speciality, that means is that you see yourself roughly moving into that direction, and that will be something obviously you need to be passionate about. Now, while I thought about this, I thought, okay, listen, why do I need to specialize so much? I actually have someone in my life who's a real life case study of someone who didn't go and study anything, and that's my dad. And essentially, he got into a business as like a sales clerk, and he just worked himself up. From sales clerk, he became a sales manager, right? From sales manager, he worked himself up to become the managing director. From managing director, he worked himself up to become a CEO. And I mean, this was a company doing easily $30 million per annum. But essentially, one lesson he told me that he took away from this 20 years of working without a qualification, when I asked him, Dad, why is it worth it to become a CA or an MBA? Essentially, what he said is that all this knowledge that I've learned in 20 years, you will learn within 7 or 8 years, which gives you an extreme accelerated pace of learning. And that is why I said that it helps you with your ignorance debt. You pay off your ignorance debt as soon as possible. Now, moving on to the second question that I asked myself, and that is, are you knowledge hungry? Do you actually want to ultra specialize? Is this something that I actually find interesting? Is it enjoyable for me to study? Because there are some people that study to the degree that they go into new territory. Let's say you're going to study finance, and then you move from finance into a medical field, or not even medical field. Let's say you go study psychology after that. That is like completely different. People just like studying. Now, a question that I want to ask myself is like, do I like studying finance so much? Do I feel that I'll be able to spend another year or 2 years on just studying, just preparing myself? Because essentially, if you think about it, it's like a pyramid. The longer you build your base, the wider you build your base, that means essentially the higher you can go. Because the larger the base means the higher the pyramid can go. So with your studies, you have to ask yourself, am I capable of doing another year or 2 years, even after my last 5 years of studying to become just what I am right now, which is a chartered accountant? And while I was thinking about me actually being knowledge hungry, being a continuous learner, I actually reflected upon the fact that most of, or maybe all of the greatest people of all time were described as continuous learners. They would always read, they would always advocate for more study, and essentially the Bible also says it. It says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And that is actually quite an interesting thing, but again, I ask myself the question, am I not skilled enough yet? And I think a sure tell sign that you should look out for is, if business doesn't interest you anymore, then maybe studying further isn't an option for you. Maybe just get into the real life of things and start working and just maybe start building up skills. Like I said, you're already so specialized. Now, to wrap things up, what has been my conclusion from all of this introspection? Essentially, I would love to become a 1 of 1, in my personal opinion, because I don't think many people can say that, they are a chartered accountant and they have an MBA. Now, I don't want to chase the titles. That's not really what I want to do. But, I mean, I don't know, I'm so desperate to just get into business. I've even, after the 3 years of articles that I'm now completing, essentially I've told myself, listen, I'm saving up money. Next year when I'm done with my ACCA, I am going to go into a business full time. And essentially I think my MBA, I can only go and study it when I'm like 25 years old. And I'm currently 23. So essentially I have maybe a year left to decide finally, listen, Conrad, do you actually want to go do this, you know? But I think how I feel now in my heart, maybe this will change, right? You reserve the right to change your mind. I like that. Essentially, if this changes, then it would either be because I have, one, just seen that there is no utility in it. Two, I wouldn't even feel motivated to go and study. Or three would be that I found a business and I feel that if I'm going to go study my MBA, it's just going to take another year or two away from me. So I know this video was very specific to a very specific person, but if this video helped you and you maybe like to check out some of my other videos, I'm going to link a video up here. And I'm so happy you watched till the end. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.